Alcoholic. It's really nice to be here tonight. Kate, thank you for asking me to join you, and it's wonderful seeing all of the different locations that people are coming from, and it's I think I've been to meetings in many of the states that I see represented here. I was thinking about the time that I guess it was the late '90s. I came to D.C. to practice law in one of the large firms. And it was a really grisly time. It seemed that no matter where I turned, one of my clients was in trouble. And I finally came up with a week when I could just get out of town and get away. And so I flew to California and rented a convertible and drove up the Pacific Coast Highway, which was something that I'd always wanted to do, as I call it, in search of self. And I pulled into San Francisco, and one of the first things that I ever learned in AA was, if you're in a town and you don't know anybody and you're feeling a little off, just call the first number in the phone book, AA, and ask them where there's a meeting. So I'm in San Francisco, and I call AA, and someone answers, and I say, hi, I'm Scott, and I'm an alcoholic from DC. I'm driving up the coast, and I'd kind of like to just check into a meeting. And he goes, oh, dude, he goes, there's this young people's meeting on the hill that's really, really great. You need to go to it. And I'm like, hey, listen, I really appreciate that, but I'm not young, And he goes, it doesn't matter. He goes, you should go. And he goes, it's the best meeting in town. And so I went, and I remember just what a haven and what a joy-filled and exciting room that was. And it just added a kind of a magic to a week-long trip up the Pacific Coast Highway that I will never forget, and that it was certainly a turning point for me, as there have been many turning points along the way. My story is pretty ordinary. My folks got married in their early 50s. Dad was a doctor, and mom was a doctor's wife at a small town of Alabama. They had 4 kids in 5 years, and they set out to make a life for themselves. And they didn't see that alcoholism was a part of the story. It was a dry county in Alabama, so there was no place to go to get a drink, but there were bootleggers that would bring cases of vodka to the back door, and we would, exchange hands. Money would change hands, and in would come the liquor. And I remember saying, being a kid, just going like, isn't it, asking my folks, isn't this against the law? And they would say, well, just don't ask too many questions, kid. And early on, alcohol was sort of cloaked in denial. You'd ask a question, you wouldn't really get an answer. Alcoholism is rampant in my family. It goes up on both sides, on my father's side, on my mother's side. One of the earliest memories that I have and my parents were both alcoholic and prescription drug addicts. There were amphetamines up by the orange juice glasses in the kitchen, and there were heavy sleeping pills in the nightstand. And what I remembered was that I was never going to do that, and there were lots of fights, and it was an unhappy house, and it became unhappier because alcoholism is a progressive disease, because it's also a family disease. We all got swept up into it. And so it was never going to happen to me until it did. And I was, I guess, about 12 or 13, and there was a small bottle of brandy that my parents had brought back from a trip. And I took it and opened it, and in front of them, I remember where I was and how I felt, and that brandy hit me, and man, I fell in love. It was warm, and it was the first time in my life that I relaxed, and I remember that feeling as vividly as I'm sitting here right now. And everything after that actually was kind of just an effort to get back to that feeling again, that I wanted to be in love the way I felt when I took my first drink. So my progression was nasty, brutish, and short. I went from cold beer to intravenous injection of morphine in 4 years or 5 years. And I was toast by the time I was about 18, but I managed to drag it out for a little while longer. All of the stuff that you hear about, car wrecks, guns, bad people, dropping out of school. I was a great student until I wasn't. And then there's a small section in the beginning of the big book that says, the day comes where the alcoholic can't get drunk on alcohol anymore. And so the doctor comes by and gives him sedatives, and then that doesn't work anymore. And so then they begin to give him morphine, and then that doesn't work anymore. And then he ends up doing institutions. And that's precisely my story in about 2 or 3 sentences. there were a couple of drug overdoses. I ended up in a short-term psych hospital in Birmingham, Alabama, of all places. And then that didn't take. They gave me all of the drugs you give somebody like me, and they didn't tell me not to drink and take drugs on it, so I did, and it just got predictable results. When I thought that the bottom couldn't get any lower, I was really wrong. So they shipped me off to a long-term psych hospital in Connecticut it was in the 77, I believe. And rehab and recovery wasn't something that really people talked about. It was just, I was an insane teenager that they needed to do something with, and so they shipped me away. And I never expected to return to Alabama, and I never expected to come out of that hospital. I figured that I was congenitally crazy and that I would be there for the rest of my life, and that would be fine with me. That was pretty much what I thought was going to happen. What I didn't know was that when they locked me up, they locked me away from the booze and the drugs. So what ended up happening was I withdrew, and I didn't know that that was what I was doing. I knew that I was up for 6 or 7 days and fighting with the staff and all of that kind of stuff. But what ended up happening was I ended up getting a little bit of hope and started getting a little bit better. And they gave me the seal of approval. They said, after 10 months, you're good to go. Good luck to you. I knew that I should not go back to Alabama. I did not. I knew that I wouldn't make it if I went back there. My parents' alcoholism was getting worse. They were going down the drain, and I had just enough of hope to kind of keep me up in Connecticut. But I drank and did drugs again, and shortly I was right back where I was before I was admitted, and I couldn't understand it because I'd had the best help that the country had to offer, and so I kind of floundered around for a little while longer, and then I was talking with a priest one day, and he said, "We have an AA meeting here on Monday night that might be helpful," and I was barely 22. I had 1 month into my 22nd year, and I went to my first AA meeting, and I've never left. They told me to don't drink and keep coming back, and so that's exactly what I've done. And it was wild. I never expected to stay at all. I certainly never expected to kind of fall in love with it as a way of life and as a way of approaching living. And that's pretty much what happened. I kind of first thought, well, I'm too young. I walked in and there were these purple banners on the wall that said, "Live and let live, one day at a time, easy does it." And I'm like, oh, for the love of God, it's come to this. You know what I mean? I'm fresh out of a psych hospital, a college dropout. I'm living at the YMCA, and I get arrogant when I walk into my first meeting. But they called on me, and I said, and I shared probably the most honest thing I've ever had shared up to that point. And I said, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. I just can't keep living like this. And they said, you don't have to be an alcoholic to be here. And what do you mean? I said, everybody in the room just said, you got a desire to stop drinking? I said, yeah, for a little while. They go, good, that's all we need. Just we're going to do it one day at a time, and we're going to, easy does it. Don't drink, come back next week and let us know how it goes. And so, the days turned into weeks, and the weeks became months, and the months rolled into years, and it has been an extraordinarily satisfying way to live. I'm one of these people who's like really grateful for being sober, and I'm really grateful for AA. And when I was new, and at several points along the way, I just couldn't stand listening to somebody like me, like, oh, not him again, Mr. Gratitude. But I was thinking, not too long ago, that it's never too late to have a happy childhood, but you and you alone are responsible for the second one. And I was thinking about what a miserable kid I was, and how I've actually gotten a chance sober to do all of those things that I drank my way out of, like drank my way out of school, and drank my way out of participating in the community, and drank my way out of talents that I had. I was musically inclined, toss that. And so, I came in, and they said, well, it gets better. And I said, I think you're lying. But I said, all right, I'll give it to 25. But if it's not better by 25, I'm done. And they go, okay, well, let's talk at 25. And 25 came and went, and I was surprised to still be here. And I was, it had actually had 3 friends who were young people from the psych hospital kill themselves by the time I was 25. And every one of them was drunk when they did it. And so I realized that the only difference between my friends and me was that I was sober in AA. And even more startling than that was that I actually had moments where I really enjoyed living, you know, and I was a busboy for my first year of sobriety. So, it took a while to get my feet under me, but they said, you know, if you get a good foundation, you can do absolutely anything. So I hit 25 and I thought, okay, I can do anything. So I bought a Suzuki 650G and I rode the hell out of it for about a year. And I see someone from New Hampshire. I remember going up into the White Mountains of New Hampshire and into the Berkshires of Massachusetts, you know, like looking around and just being really, really grateful to be alive and just loving it, man. But I realized that I needed to get rid of it because I loved beating it. And, you know, you keep hitting a motorcycle at 80 to 90 miles an hour, you know, it's just a question of when, not if. So I got rid of it and I ended up going back to school and started as a freshman when I was 27 and then somehow ended up graduating and remarkably turned into heading into law school, which was, it had never even occurred to me. But I believe in the notion of turning it over and following when one door opens. And I just kind of kept getting, you know, people go, you know, you ought to fill this application out, you know, you ought to sign this, you ought to talk to this person. And so I did. And I ended up going to law school just like, you know, one does in AA, you know, you do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And one day I woke up and I kind of came to and I was in class and I went, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? You know, these people have never wanted anything other than to be here all their life. And here you are, like you just went out for a loaf of bread. And I was like, well, you know, it's too late now. You know, you're like 50 grand in debt and you'll never pay it off waiting table. So you got to see it through. So I did. Came to DC in '95 to practice for one of the large firms and have had a really good run. And, you know, then that changed. And I ended up in a more sane and easier job that's 9 to 5 and has a lot of less of the pressures that were present in private practice. And what ended up happening was came a time when I needed to change direction in sobriety again, and it was either, you know, the question was kind of stark. It was sort of drink or expand your spiritual life, you know, pick which one you're going to do. And I decided to go with the expanding my spiritual life. And what had ended up happening was I ended up getting involved in a lot of things that are, you know, A is still the foundation, but been pulled into things, some of the music, symphony chorus in town. I was thinking when I see people from around the country that we went to China on a tour, and there was one night that I was going to be free of obligations. And I looked up AA and I found out that there was an AA meeting in Beijing, and I went down to the desk of this hotel we were staying in. I was like saying to the woman that comes to us, can you show me where this is? You know, and she goes, well, certainly, sir. Let me give you a map. And so she printed out this map and she said, now go out to the cab that's right outside and point to these Chinese characters and they'll know where to take you. And so I did. And, you know, I'm driving and the guy speaks no English and I speak no Chinese. And we start driving off and I was like, what are you doing? You know, you're on the other side of the world and you're in this car with this person. You got no idea where you're going. And I was like, well, you know, it's an AA thing. It's going to work out. And we ended up pulling up in front of 4 buildings and he waves and I get out and I'm like, where am I supposed to go? And then I see this guy who looks like he might be American. And he's sort of walking into this building and I sort of follow him. And the next thing you know, I'm in an elevator and we're going to the same floor. And he goes, the meeting? And I said, yeah. And I walked into this meeting in Beijing and the 12 steps and the 12 traditions are on the wall in Cantonese and they were speaking English. And I knew I was home. You know, I knew I was home in Beijing. And I knew when I went to a different meeting in Hong Kong that I was home there. And when I go to meetings on the West Coast or in Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. or Colbert County, Alabama, I'm home. You know, AA is it is my spiritual home. And I am delighted to be here tonight. And I am going to just thank you again, Kate, for having me with you. And thank all of you for being here tonight. It's really good to be with you. And that's it.